basically ran ERs, emergency medicine or rooms, throughout rural Oregon. And from Hermiston, Astoria to Tillamook, all over.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
I'm learning something too here.
yeah. Mordecai says, hey, we're in trouble and we want your help because you're by the king. And she says, no one goes into the king unless they've been summoned or they die.
Cool.
All right.
I love you.
I love you.
Don't say that to all my guests. On that note.
When you're bored and feeling blue, and you don't know what to do, just turn on your screen and keep watching me. It's Mandy and Friends, where the fun never ends. Mandy and Friends, where the fun never ends.
Hi! Welcome to Mandy and Friends. Oh my gosh, you guys, I can't even believe this is finally happening after... How many years has it been? I started this show in 2018, and I have wanted to interview this person for a very long time, but haven't had the chance or really good reason until now. And that is none other than my own father, Bruce Farmer. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, welcome. Yeah, you're here.
Yes, I am.
We made it.
We made it.
Yay.
Finally.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Well, yeah, starting with that, though, you grew up with my grandparents, your parents.
Yes.
But you guys traveled a lot.
Yes, we did.
Can you talk about your early childhood super fast?
Well, I'm an Army brat. My father retired from the Army as a lieutenant colonel in the veterinary corps. The Army trained him in nuclear physics, and he worked on the atomic test site, Area 51, in 1960 in the Sierra Nevadas. And so he helped write the first material on the effects of radiation on tissue. So my mom was had a master's in arts and all that stuff from Chicago Institute of Art. She was an artist, a potter, and so they were, what we might call a power couple in their own way. I was a single child, and so born in Colorado, went to San Antonio, Texas, and then over to Oregon, and traveled all over, basically from coast to coast. Ultimately went down to Bolivia. And my dad helped the Bolivian Army develop a food dehydration plant. And he won an award for that.
I mean, I knew...
Yeah.
Wait. I knew a lot of things about Grandpa, and I knew all of that except the dehydration plant.
Yes.
I thought he was trying to get food or water. Aqueducts?
No. The Bolivian Army, this is 1964. Bolivia at the time was the poorest nation in the world.
Yeah.
Whatever crops they grew, so the U.S. Army sent him down on loan to the Bolivian Army, and he went down into basically the semi-tropical near the Amazon area, and built kind of he kind of patched things together, made deal with the oil companies for generators. I mean, it was one thing, but he built a dehydration plant where carrots and things like that could be packaged in a little plastic bag, and so the military had food. And for that, he won the Order of the Condor, which is the highest medal someone can win in Bolivia.
Wow.
And then we came home, and he loved Oregon the most.
Yeah.
They did.
Because Grandpa was from Nebraska and Grandma was
he
from
was
New York.
from Nebraska, but before they married, he was stationed in Europe. He was part of the Berlin airlift, and so she was a secretary in there, and they met, and so they traveled Europe all the time. They said the Willamette Valley is very similar to many places in Switzerland, and they were in love with it. So we ended up out on Skyline Road, Germantown Road, Kaiser Road, all of those places, and built
All
a
those
home.
roads.
Yeah,
They lived on all the roads. No.
they're kind of emblazoned in my mind. I went
Yeah.
to Sunset High School,
Hey-o.
got a degree in at Portland State University, and got into medical school, and trained at Emmanuel Hospital in surgery, and then primarily trauma and burns and things like that, and then basically ran ERs, emergency medicine rooms, throughout rural Oregon, and from Hermiston, Astoria to Tillamook, all over.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
I'm learning something too here.
yeah, I was the guy that would show up at Tillamook General and run it for 24 hours.
Oh.
And then I'd get in the car and drive home, and then
Well,
I'd
that's
go
why
out.
you were gone so long.
I would go to Hermiston for 24 hours. You know, it was that kind
This
of
is
thing.
when I was like 3-4 years
Yeah,
old.
it was so much fun. I
late
loved
80s,
it. Yeah.
Late 80s? Okay.
And
so
then
that's where I was circling back around was you had an intense like childhood with a lot of adventure and traveling.
Yes.
And coming from a I mean, kind of tooting my own horn here, but coming from a really amazing legacy of
Yes.
parents.
Yes.
And being an only child, without going into deep psychological explanations, but lots of people understand and know that being an only child, you develop a really good imagination.
Yes.
And so all that to say, you without saying your age, but you guys can kind of guess how old.
I'm 49.
Okay, and I'm 12. All that to say, we are here because
Yes.
you wrote a book.
Yes.
And not just any book.
Yeah.
Who is Blood Sapphire?
Well, I ended up feeling a call to enter seminary in the year 2000. So I left medicine. I wanted to study philosophical theology. I did not want to be a pastor. And I had questions I was asking. And at that time, I had a vision. This is 24 years ago. I was reading the book of Esther, and it's about this Persian queen who is really this beautiful and sagacious Jewish gal who is kept incognito by Uncle Mordecai. Says, don't tell the king anything. And so that's good until there's an evil man who comes out and wants to destroy the Jews. And this is the famous line in the book where she's realizes, Mordecai says, we're in trouble and we want your help because you're by the king. And she says, no one goes into the king unless they've been summoned or they die. He says, well, maybe you were born for such a time as this. And I feel that that is a call to every person who's listening, to every person who reads the book. There is always a call on our life. There's always a call of destiny that's wrapped up in maybe you were born for such a time as this. In this, so she steps up to the plate, and all of a sudden I had this moment. I thought, what would it be like to take that 5th century Persian queen and transport her into our century?
Yeah.
And make her out to be a spec ops elite sniper in the Israeli Defense Force.
I mean, that's pretty intense.
And this is Haddy Abrams. And essentially, she takes out a wanted terrorist in an amazing sniper shot, and that puts her on the radar of a man who wants to destroy Jerusalem with nuclear-tipped missiles. And little do they know that this guy, whose name, until the very end, his name is X. He's a Ukrainian oligarch, a billionaire. And he, 27 years earlier, killed her father
Oh, shoot.
in a terrible.
Now, you're not giving away
airplane.
the entire book.
No,
are
you can
Okay.
read. Yeah, and she has been searching for the guy who killed her father.
Right.
This shot puts him on a collision course, and in the book, she'll find a lot of stuff, but essentially at one point when things are so, she's been through all sorts of trauma,
Yeah.
and finally the director of Mossad will call her. She doesn't know who it is, and he announces who he is, and he says, we know about X and what he wants to do to our country. And we know he's trying to get to you, and everywhere you go, he seems to show up. So, in order to find him, we want you to get him. And she goes, well, that's ridiculous. He says, yes. You mean you want me to be the goat, a sacrificial goat? You're waiting around? He says, yes, but maybe you were born for this moment.
Oh, shoot.
And as the story unwinds, she and her love, ex-ranger, master sergeant, now an NYPD detective, will join forces, and yes, they will go after X.
Nice.
So that's the story. So I had that vision 24 years ago.
Yeah.
And I started writing and then would put the manuscript down. Started writing.
So yeah, let me touch on that because I'm your daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whoa, which means this book, in a weird roundabout way, has been a part of my life for the last 24 years.
Yes.
Because I remember when you started talking about it, and then you would write little pieces here and there. And then you'd be like, hey, let me read these little pieces. I remember one of my friends, Ashley, Ashley and I would sit and we'd be like, okay. You'd read little portions. And then you went to New York to do research.
Yes,
And then
yes.
I remember you buying all these books to do research and more research. Long story short, question, first of all, what made you keep going? What was going on? Why did it take you that long?
I ended up teaching college in Los Angeles, and then from there I had a serious back injury that required surgery, and out of that developed a fitness program for rehabilitating severely injured backs.
Oh yeah.
And had a relationship with Oregon Health Sciences University, the physical therapy department, and we had put in motion a grant to fund research. And in 2016, I had basically a space and equipment and was working people out. We're waiting for the grant, and the grant fell through. And I was suddenly wham. And I really didn't know what to do, and I thought maybe I should see a therapist, talk with someone about this, a psychologist. And I have always loved Carl Jung, and so I found a senior counselor from Switzerland, and she and we sat down, and Jung himself interpreted over 80,000 dreams. I mean, he is the guy. And Jungian psychotherapy depends or requires that you tap into your unconscious, because there's all this stuff in there. And I had a dream. So I said, I've had this dream. And her name is Martha. Martha got out her pad and pen and was, tell me your dream. I mean, they're like boom.
Yeah.
And I said, I dreamt that I saw Robert Frost, the poet, and he was laying on his back at the bottom of a clear mountain stream that was tumbling down the mountain. but it was covered in ice. And he was there like some fish trying to get out. Well, along the edges, it was kind of melting because the moonlight had come up. So Martha went, oh.
Okay.
She said, have you ever written poetry?
Oh.
And I went, well, yeah, I mean, when I was a sophomore in high school.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And so what happened? Well, so I was into literature at that time in high school, but when I made the decision to go the science route for the last 50 years, that's all I've been doing is science. Uh-huh. She said, well, with Jungian archetypes, when we're at work in the world, doing our jobs to, produce and feed a family, whatever, we live under the sun. But when we do artistry, painting, we do creativity, that's under the moonlight. And she said, so there's a poet in you that's trying to get out.
Oh.
It's been in the deep freeze for 50 years. The moonlight's coming up, and your subconscious, your unconscious is saying, now's the time. So I had all of this stuff, and I started writing, and I never stopped.
So basically, you'd started it back in 2000.
Yeah, and I was just, I was in that
You were getting
atmosphere.
your master's. You were getting your master's in theology.
Yes.
And you kind of wrote bits and pieces, did plenty of research. I definitely remember all the research that you did. But it sounds like life got in the way. Just plain and simple.
Yeah.
And you kind of just put it on the shelf.
Yes.
Now, I'm genuinely, I have no idea. How far along in the book were you when you initially put it on the shelf?
I really wasn't all that far along. I just had I had written actually one book. Nothing happened with it. And then I started a second book. It's all Blood, Sapphire's Revenge, but it went, but ultimately when I met Martha Blake, I began coming to her with scenes and chapters. I would say, I've been reading this and I want to read it to you. Would you mind? Well, for a counselor like her, when you listen to someone's writing and their reading, it's like looking at their art. You can see into their soul.
Yeah, totally.
And so I started putting together this book, and she would always say, someday I'll be in the airport and I'll find your book and I'll be reading it. And so I started putting together these scenes.
Yeah.
And I had a sense that, Haddy Abrams she's a rocket. And she's always been caught between Friedrich Nietzsche and the will to power and that way, or Kierkegaard, who was an existentialist, who coined the term the leap of faith.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a lot going on. Well, so I want to talk more about the fact that it's a psycho-spiritual book. Because I had some people in my life, not super close people, just people I was talking I was talking about your book to people I know. And they're like, oh, I love Christian action adventure novels, and I really want everyone to understand it's a psycho-spiritual book. There are Christian themes, but it's not a squeaky clean. No, in the Amazon pantheon of categories, it is not Jewish literature and it is not Christian literature. Okay. There you go. This is a military thriller. This is down and dirty. It's very intense. This is like you're in the army now, and this is the way life goes. Also, I'd love to point out, because you're a doctor, you get into like the fine minutia
Yes.
of what is going on in their bodies.
Yeah, and in the
when they get
intent,
shot or
yeah,
blown up.
whatever, all of that,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's we would call it character driven.
Mm-hmm.
The book kind of goes where the characters lead it.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take her through as she tries to run and fight with God. He keeps pushing her to the answer of finding X, finding out where X is. Ultimately, at the very last, the epilogue says it all. She will end up saying, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one, and I confess that I could have died 1,000 times, but you saved me so many times,
Yeah.
and you were in charge, and it all worked out. So, you're amazing."
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, but I wanted to touch too on growing up with you was an adventure, still is. But this book is a real testament to who you are as a person, mainly because let's just paint a picture. Like we'll be out in public with people. This is my entire childhood. And you will pray over people.
Yes.
Just, you'll go up to strangers. You'll get
Yep.
a word of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Holy Spirit is alive and well
Yes.
in working
Yes.
in you and through you. And just seeing that and watching that as your daughter, like, it definitely has a massive impact on my life. But can you take us through, in a nutshell, your own personal spiritual journey?
Sure. I think I went to church once or twice with my dad when I was a boy. My parents were moral people, and most likely in their way they knew God, but it just wasn't something, church was not an item. And I went through high school, and during high school years, I was definitely philosophically inclined, and yes, I read Friedrich Nietzsche and Soren Kierkegaard and the existentialists at that time. And I ended up getting into, it was 1968, 69, 70. I mean, this is Haight-Ashbury, and I visited Haight-Ashbury. I mean, you kind of all...
In San Francisco.
In San Francisco. And so it was a time of free love and drugs and psychedelic craziness. And I ended up working on some apartment complexes out on in Multnomah, in Portland. And I was taking a break at lunch one time and was just sitting there, and suddenly this voice popped out. Just this voice said, "What are you doing?" And I looked around like this, and I went, I'm sitting in my car eating my lunch. I ended up dealing with a spiritual force that gave me the ability to tell the future. And this went on for weeks. I mean, I really would have messages about what was happening, and it would happen. And then one day, this voice began to plague me and wouldn't leave me alone. And at the end of the day, I was suicidal. And I went to a friend's house. My dearest friend, his older brother, a year earlier had become a Jesus person. This is 1972 now. And we hated Rick for that. But there I was, desperate.
Yeah.
And I found myself with Rick saying, I explained what was going on, and I looked at him and I said, "Rick, can you, what's happening?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, this is in the Bible, in 2 Samuel, where and talks about King Saul and bringing up this spirit from the dead, who is Samuel." And he said that the ability of that person to do that was through the same spirit that has you.
Yeah.
And I went, "Well, can you help me?" And he said, no, I can't do a thing for you.
Yeah.
And I was so shocked, and I went, and ultimately he said, the only person who can help you is Jesus Christ. When I heard that name, I went, oh, no. Mm-hmm. But we talked, and ultimately Rick said, we need to end this conversation. Here's the deal. There's a good and a bad, a black and a white, Jesus and Satan. Jesus is stronger than Satan. Mm-hmm. If you want to be free of this, you have to ally yourself with the strong man.
Yeah.
And that made sense to me. And I went, okay, what do I have to do?
Yeah.
He said, bow your head, ask God to forgive you your sins, and ask Jesus inside your heart. And I bowed my head for really the first time in my life. And the moment I bowed my head, this presence came into this room.
Yeah.
It makes my hair just stand up. I just went, oh my goodness. And I said, boy, forgive me.
Yeah.
And then I said, Jesus, if you're really out there, come into my heart. And there in the corner of that room, a light burst forth like the light that you see up in the, in those theaters. Everything's dark, and it's a stage light that cuts through everything to spotlight an actor. This light went boom, 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 and just hit me in my chest, went through me and threw me back.
Yeah.
I was just thrown back. And I was just kind of shocked, amazed, and I said, Rick, he came in.
Yeah.
And Rick leaned over and said, he said he would. And then I said, this voice is screaming now, but I'm not afraid of it. Mm-hmm. He said, you tell it you don't want it, and to go in Jesus' name. Mm-hmm. And I went, that's kind of easy, isn't it? I mean, it's like, he said, just do it.
Yeah.
So I bowed my head and I said, I don't want you, whatever you are, go. And I felt it leave. My hands actually went like this.
Yeah.
And I went, it's gone. He said, it had to go.
That's awesome.
So yes, Jesus changed my life in 1972.
Yes.
And so I've spent my life, when I started writing Blood, Sapphire's Revenge, what I did not want was, and Jesus said this, and Jesus did this, and Jesus that's not the way it is I'm not trying to convert anyone. Yeah. This is a military thriller. Right. You're in the Army. I was in the Air Force, enlisted, and it's just down and dirty.
This is
in
life.
This is life, and the book is life.
Yes.
So Shira, who is Haddy's battle buddy, mm-hmm. is a Druze Arab who has converted to Christianity, mm-hmm. and at times when they're in the worst situation, she'll go, Jesus, help us. Yeah. That's where you'll hear the name Jesus. Mm. But really, it's not Christian literature, and it's not Jewish literature. I'm not here to promote Israel or any of that. It's just I chose Israel and the Jewish race for my protagonists because they are an intense people that is under the pressure cooker of life since their inception. Yeah. And so what better place to have a protagonist come out of that? Yeah, right. And that's Haddy Abrams.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, and I also love the fact that, in a lot of these thrillers and action adventure shows, usually like the driving, at least when I watch these things, the driving factor or driving force is like family. I'm doing this for my kid, or I'm doing this for mom, or like the writing is so surfacey. Yeah. And to a certain degree. And I love that Haddy doesn't have anyone. It really.
No, she's an only child.
And so that's where like the philosophy and all of this other spiritual stuff really comes into play.
Yeah.
And really is like this way deeper like internal struggle versus like I gotta survive for my child.
Yeah. Hattie is at war with herself, and I have taken the advice of Susan Atwood, a very famous writer, who says you want to take your characters, your protagonists, through every single situation, and when they're at their worst, you push them over the edge.
Yeah.
And when you do, the reader sees themselves. Another character pair that people have loved about the book is there's a Russian escort named Brianna Ivanova, who's the highest paid escort in Moscow. And she ends up working for X. She's the honey trap, the honey in the honey trap. And there's the enforcer kind of runs the show. He's really a bad guy.
Yeah.
And she is now trying to escape from the enforcer because she realizes this guy is really bad. And then what happens is there's this scientist, French scientist, Francois Lecomte, who is a nuclear physicist who's developing these special little bombs. And X says to his crew, I want that guy in my research facility in Odessa, Ukraine. And he says, who are we going to get him there, to sign the contracts? And of course, Ivan Jurek says, Miss Sable and Diamonds, Brianna Ivanova. And he says, well, but she isn't returning my emails. And so what happens is Brianna suddenly wakes up and walks into her living room at night, and there's Ivan and the henchman, and he says, this is what you're going to do. You're going to seduce this guy and make him sign this contract.
Oh, man.
And what happens is she's on the plane going to Beirut, Lebanon, where he's working, and she hates herself. There's no way out.
Yeah.
He's going to kill her and her daughter, Uliana. They've got Uliana. What am I going to do? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And she says, think. And then she goes, and I've got to seduce some guy, and he's probably this yucky old guy, whatever. And she gets the photograph, and there he is in his lab, and he's a drop-dead, gorgeous 25-year-old sandy-haired. He's a hunk.
Dang it.
But he's completely genius. He lives in the lab. And she goes, oh. Then she says, I'm going to enjoy this. So then they meet at this bar. And so she starts in on her thing and suddenly realizes she's falling in love with him, and she's going, no, this is impossible because I'm seducing him to the dark side.
Right.
I can't do this, but I am doing it.
So
and
there's layers here.
Yeah, it's called the impossible love. And for people listening, we have all had those moments where we have fallen in love with someone or had an attraction with someone, and something inside us goes, that ain't going to work out. I don't care. And so, there's
I don't care what you say.
I don't care. I'm not listening to you. And so there are themes there that readers have found. Ultimately, Brianna will end up being part of this funny little team.
No, you're not going to give anything away.
No. But what happens is people recognize that Brianna is there to save Uliana regardless. It's like, get out of my way.
Right. Yeah.
So there's that going on.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Kids first.
Yeah, right.
So, wow. That's a lot of awesomeness.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is she, back when she was climbing Mount Rainier as part of an expedition thing, you can do that. or no, on her way up.
Who are we talking about?
We're talking about Haddy Abrams as part of this, climbing group, and on the way down are these 3 rangers who are taking a break to climb the mountain, and one of them is named Wolf James. And as they pass each other, their eyes connect, and they know they're meant for each other, but they keep going. And for 9 years, Wolf looks for her.
Oh, dang.
And he's in so much trauma, he starts sketching. He becomes a sketch artist and just draws her again and again and again. And then finally he says, okay, she's dead. I can't find her. He starts to burn all of these sketches. And then Haddy is still remembering that guy on the mountain. He had amber eyes and he's this beard and everything. And she prays. She says, I want to get married. I want kids. And I want him to have amber eyes. So da 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 da.
Wow. That sounds like a roller coaster of a book.
Yeah.
And I'm excited. I know we don't have time to talk about this, but we got something in the works. That's awesome.
So we're very close to pitching motion picture studios.
That's very exciting.
Yes.
I would love to talk about really quickly how someone can get their hands on this book. So what is the easiest and fastest way if someone wanted to buy it right now while they're watching this?
You put in Amazon.
Yes.
Blood Sapphire's Revenge.
All right, right
and
here.
Boom.
We'll have it at the
and
bottom.
it's in the Kindle print, hard, soft, and Audible.
And Audible. You guys can
I did the Audible.
Yeah, it's the author.
Yes.
Which is always, I love when the author reads the book because they know exactly how and when and why to do inflections and all the stuff. So definitely highly recommend Audible. And then you mentioned the second edition.
Yes.
So that's coming out. That's exciting.
Yes.
Anything else you want to mention briefly about anything coming up in the pipeline?
The greatest gift that I've been given are my kids.
Aww.
And my grandkids.
Yay.
I want that. I was thinking about that this morning. I'm thankful for the many gifts and talents that we all receive, but each one, and I'm thankful for what I've been given. But my kids, my family, is my most precious possession.
Yay.
That's my greatest. Yes. That's what I want to say.
All right. Well, thank you. Okay, well, on that note, this has been an amazing interview. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for flying from Georgia just to be on my show.
You're welcome.
It's not true. No, you came for the grandkids, I know.
Really?
I am hopeful and excited that this will get turned into a movie and also become a bestseller.
Yes.
I think it will. People need to, especially if you enjoy thrillers.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
I love you.
I love you.
Don't say that to all my guests. On that note, bye.
Bye.
We'll fade to black. All right. Cool. But we're going to be focusing over here.
But
Don't look at it.
I'm supposed to be looking at you.
Yes, so we're having a conversation. I know there's so many cameras. Okay. And then I have to remember which camera I'm... There. Hi. All right.